And Jenna is a sales manager at Outreach for the emerging segment. And it's a pleasure to have you on here today, Jenna. And yeah, you can share
Yeah,
a few.
no, thanks, Ben. I'm excited to be chatting with you today.
Absolutely. And Jenna has been a client of Abundant for the past year. And it's the reason that I have her on here today is I feel that she's really someone who has taken on the mantle of the future of leadership and the way that she leads her team. And is someone who's just really committed to her growth and being the best leader that she can be. And those are the types of examples that we want to be having a conversation with and giving people a chance to have some insight into how they think, how they're showing up, and how they're treating their own journey as a leader. So Jenna, welcome again. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, Jenna, I want to start by taking us back a year ago, right? And a lot has happened in the past year for you, both before COVID and, of course, during COVID as well. And, when I think back to when we met, it was at the Abundant Leadership Live event that we had in Vegas, right? Or Lake Las Vegas. And I remember you were invited by your friend, Cole Link, to check us out, come to the event. And you made the decision to spend a year with us at that time and to go through our programs. And when we look back at the past year, I'm curious, Jenna, how do you feel that your leadership has really up-leveled, or the way that you show up as a leader versus where you were a year ago?
That is a great question, and also a very loaded question, because so much has happened in the past year and in the best way. Yeah, when I go back to that time in Vegas, so that was in November of last year, I was still at a company called PayScale, where I had grown my entire sales career. Was a very great experience for me, but most of my time there, I was an individual contributor. Had a lot of life changes. And one of those decisions was to step into leadership last summer, actually. So before we had met. So I was still kind of a fresh new manager. I think the biggest difference, big picture before I dive in, was I hadn't really developed the confidence in myself of this knowingness of trusting what I was doing each day. Overthinking my game plan for the week, for the month, for the quarter. Really needing to have a lot of control and perfection on how I was going to run my team, which honestly just left me in a constant state of anxiety. And so I remember I kind of had come to a point end of summer last year where I was like, wow, I think I'm actually dealing with chronic stress. Each day I'm waking up and my mind is thinking about the future and the conversations I'm going to have, if people are going to accept what I'm saying, if they're going to want to listen to someone younger than them. And that wasn't where I wanted to come from. I wanted to come from a place of giving and helping people see their true potential, just like I had done in sales, which was such a powerful moment for me. So, I think how that's really evolved was, first and foremost, in November of last year, I realized that I had the opportunity to let go of how I had been showing up in this identity that I had for so long, right? And that was a great identity. It had gotten me up to where I was at. But I had the option at that moment to decide what kind of leader I wanted to be. And no one had ever really helped me think of that perspective before, kind of giving me this overarching North Star of how I wanted to show up, the impact I wanted to have on the world and my team, and then start taking steps to move in that direction. Mm-hmm. So defining what that North Star was for me was really, really big. And I remember when we did a visualization last year, my one vision was that I would walk in to my team and just show up myself, not feeling anxious or thinking about how my manager was going to look at my numbers or if I wasn't going to hit my quota, but really just showing up and connecting with people on a moment-to-moment basis. And I can genuinely say, 1 year later, I'm close to being there, even through COVID and all of the anxiety and stress. And I'm just so grateful for that. because it's a really difficult feeling to be anxious and controlled and not really be yourself every moment that you're living, right?
Absolutely. Well, first off, great job. You're doing
Thank
great.
you.
And what you're speaking to there is important because I think sometimes, well, there's a couple things I want to unpack about what you said. And the first one is that there's sometimes an anxiety even about like, what does my vision need to be? Like, where am I going? What do I want to do? Am I on the right track? Am I on the right path? And what I'm hearing that you did is you said, you know what? I'm just going to have a vision for who I want to be and how I want to be showing up. And sometimes that's the first step of vision. It's having the vision for the qualities of how you're showing up, your values, your level of emotional well-being, what is the energy that you're giving to your team, as that does speak louder than your words. And if it's not matching your words, it's not going to be received as powerfully. And so that's what I've seen you really embrace over the past year, is kind of surrendering to like, that's where I need to start. That's what's most important. And you can trust in that. And we've had some conversations even today as we were prepping a little bit about how there's more vision that will emerge as you're pursuing that vision. So that's just something I want to highlight about what you said. And the other is that, there's a lot of stress and anxiety in taking on a manager role, even before COVID, right? You're responsible for everybody else's success at a certain level, right? They're responsible for their own results, but you're creating the environment, the container, the direction for them. And then you add COVID to the mix and going virtual and leading in a way that most people have never experienced before, and that it is entirely virtual. And there's the question of like, can I control this? And realizing you can't, and having to move through all of that, I think has been hard for a lot of people. And again, even before COVID, right? You enter this new leadership role, you're a manager for the first time, and you're thinking, I remember when I was a manager for the first time, and I've seen a lot of people be managers for the first time. And it's like, what are all the boxes I need to check to be a good manager? Making sure my quarterly plan, my weekly plan, like, am I covering everything I need to cover in the meeting? And did I share it all? Did we get through the checklist? That can produce anxiety. It's very common. And what that does is it gets in the way of the energy, right, that you're actually creating for your team. And it's more of a check the box than a, hey, how can we create connection and meaning and really engage people into their work? So I love what you're sharing there. And, with what I'm speaking to, how else would you say your leadership has changed along the lines of where I'm going with this conversation?
Yeah, so much has changed. So I would say really the impact of that shift in mindset, and, first and foremost, showing up for myself, filling my own cup up so I could really be present with each team member, each interaction. I think a lot of the result has, first and foremost, been like bringing authenticity and vulnerability into each conversation, right? And so that's really shifted the culture of my team. I kind of witnessed that at pay scale, and I'm really trying to build that and create that at my current company Outreach as well. And what that looks like is just starting my meetings differently than some managers probably would, right? Doing things like having my team journal and share, talking about things that we're grateful for. And I think especially during COVID, a big part of that is like not telling your team what they need to do, but finding a way for them to set those expectations for themselves, which is one of the most difficult things to do, right? It's so much easier to say like, hey, you should do this and you're going to see success. But really, it's helping them come up with those goals for themselves. And that might be related to sales KPIs, right? But it also might be a personal goal or development and how they want to show up differently. Because the one thing I've learned during COVID in this past year is like, life fluctuates day to day. You never know. You might have a great moment and the next day someone might really be struggling. And you can't just talk at somebody. You have to help get them out of that negative headspace, or just be present with them and allow them to be in that negative headspace. But if you've created an overarching goal or vision that you want to help that individual move towards, that's when they become unstoppable, because it gives them something to, step out of that current day negative mindset and remember what they're really aiming for, right? And of course, I do that for myself, and I'm still developing this, but if I can help my team set those goals for themselves, it's just a much healthier flow day to day.
And there's a few things you're saying that sound really simple to people watching, but they're so important. And the first one is that you're doing that for yourself first. Mm-hmm. It's just whatever it is, right? It's like a law of the universe somehow, that if you're not connecting to your own vision, you're not going to be able to help others connect to theirs in a meaningful and powerful way. There's just something about the congruency of, I've done this work to get clear on what I want, where I'm headed, and it can change, right? It can evolve over time. But when you have that level of connection to your own vision, you pass that on in the conversation to somebody else and creating the space for them. And the other thing that's interesting, and it's nuanced, but if you're a manager or you're leading someone and you're helping people create goals with an agenda, like the agenda of, like, these goals have to be in alignment with my goals, or their vision has to be in alignment with my vision, then that will be felt. And maybe they won't pick up on it consciously, but unconsciously will actually limit the vision they give themselves permission to connect to. And what you said is absolutely right, which is when they're connected to their own vision, to their own goals that are theirs, they're not given to them. It's not a quota, and we got to have quotas, right? That's helpful for people to have direction in that way. But people are going to show up much more powerfully when they're pursuing a vision versus just chasing their quota or their goal. And so, yeah, it sounds like you might have a few things to say on that.
Absolutely. And so I think part of it, and this was really uncomfortable for me when I first started doing this, but a great mentor of mine helped me develop a couple of things that has really led my team in a positive direction. First and foremost, when I first started at Outreach, I did something called like a paired interview, which you actually, spoke to me and taught me, Ben, which was really powerful. But conceptually, what that helps you do is it helps someone understand what matters most to them, right? So helping them step back and saying, okay, so envision yourself in a year from now. Like, how do you want to be known at Outreach? Who do you want to be? And it's going to be different for each and every person. I had one member who was like, I want to be like a powerful sales woman, female, who is playing with the big dogs, playing with the guys, and like, it doesn't matter my gender. There's other people who said, I want to be that person that people go to as a resource, right? Where they want me to join them on calls. They want me to do trainings for their teams. And these are often things people never think about, or don't have leaders that actually ask the bigger, more important questions. But what's important about that is, yeah, we can help develop your sales skills, but what is going to keep you going when you're not selling and things aren't going well? Who do you want to be known as? And so, those conversations, sometimes they land, sometimes people are like, why are you asking me these things? But by the end of it, people feel great. And people for the first time have taken a step outside of their work persona, and they understand what actually matters to them because someone's actually asking them. So that's really, really powerful. And the second component to that was, I've done this now twice with my team, once at PayScale and once at Outreach, but bringing together the whole team and having them create a vision of what they want the team to look like together. Right. And that takes planning and preparation, because you want to ask the leading questions, right? Like, tell me about a time when you felt most alive in a certain culture, right? It could have been from your childhood, my gymnastics experience, maybe the sorority or fraternity you were in, or maybe it was a high school sport, but what are the common characteristics of that culture? And all of a sudden, people are actually thinking about these things that they know subconsciously, but they've never verbalized. And it's allowing them to understand why it's important to articulate those things so we can drive towards it together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because the themes and the characteristics that my team at PayScale came up with was very different than what my team at Outreach came up with. So that was a cool experience to see. But the power of that is it's giving your team something to move towards together, because especially during COVID, we are all so fragmented. We're working remotely. Focusing on that culture and team component is really, really important as well.
And something powerful about what you did with your teams is that when you take them back to those experiences, whether it was with Outreach or PayScale or another company they worked with, or sports or sorority or whatever, they can see the qualities because they were experiencing them. They're memories. It's like they're not learning something new. They're remembering something they've already experienced and then being called to bring that forward where they currently are. And that feels very different than like, oh, learning this new concept and then trying to meet the standard of it. It's like, no, I've done this. I've been a part of it. I've seen it. I've felt it. I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like to show up that way. All right. It's a lot easier to see myself being a part of that, creating that in the current team. So you have really stepped into that, and it's great to see, because it's all a concept until somebody's practicing it, and it's just great to see you practicing it.
I appreciate that. It's been it's definitely pushed me in a lot of different ways and been very uncomfortable, but that's also kind of one of my life mantras is, okay, if this is scaring me, it means it's time to take action and do it.
Awesome. What was scary about it? And I know it's scary. So what was scary about it? Let me shift the energy of that question a little bit. Just what was scary?
I think I just had never had an example of anyone in a business setting who had challenged me to think abundantly or about like my overarching life goals or how I want to show up. It was always so focused on your success with hitting quota. And I've had a lot of great mentors, but no one who's really challenged me to think that deeply, especially in a team setting. And so there was a lot of fear around like, are people gonna think this is crazy? Like, are people gonna talk about me differently? It's always scary to do something for the first time, and show up, but that's when you see the biggest results and the most rewarding results. You can't experience that if you're just moving through the motions and using a playbook that you've been given. Yeah, those things are important, but if you really want to navigate new waters, you have to be willing to do those uncomfortable things.
I think a lot of managers experience the insecurity of like, who am I to ask these powerful questions? There's a realization that I think a lot of managers have the opportunity to have, which you are having, which is, I'm just the person who has the courage to ask these questions because nobody else is, right? We're inundated with agenda all the time from media, right? It's like we get thousands of messages per day from different marketing, advertising, et cetera, our environments and how they're conditioning us. And there's not a whole lot of people getting the authentic connection from someone who's just creating a space for them to connect to, like, what do you want? Like, it's that simple. Like, what do you want? I feel like the Notebook right now. What do you want? You know the scene I'm talking about?
Yes, it's been a while.
What do you want? Yeah. And when people realize what they want, then they can lead themselves from possibility. I'm holding my hand up because we play this game sometimes at Abundant. It's like, are you focusing on what you want, or are you focusing on what you don't want? Because you're going to move towards what you think could talk about most.
Right.
And when you're moving towards possibility, hey, we still got to like change some things to get there. We got to grow. We got to get better at our job. But it feels so much different than like, hey, you're inadequate in this skill set and you need to improve to hit this standard. You've got a problem you need to fix. That just feels so much different, right?
Absolutely. And I think also like a big part of it specific to sales, and this could be any role, but it's more fun when you show up like yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think at pay scale, when I really started seeing a lot of success and went from a really good salesperson to the top salesperson, was when I was no longer afraid to speak my mind to prospects in a positive way. You know, like I am someone who loves deep conversations. I love really getting to know people and understanding what makes them think the way that they do. And when I was able to start bringing that into my sales conversations, like, oh, wait, walk me through really quick. Why wouldn't we want to present it to the CRO, right? Because I know this is something that you're desperate to get. I want to help you get it. So help me understand why that doesn't feel appropriate, right? And it gives people like a space to really connect with you. And for me, it was just like I didn't have to have a mask anymore. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I had to follow a script. That's how I learned. You know, that's how I became really great. But when you can bring your own voice into sales is when you're going to find success. I think that's the key to success in sales overarchingly. You know, no great salesperson is going to sound the same on a phone call. And so if I can encourage my team to really be authentic and show up themselves when it's them, you know, them and I, that starts bleeding into their sales conversations. And that's when it becomes fun, right? And like you want to enjoy what you're doing. And sales is so high stress that you have to find a way to make it fun for people. Because our life is so integrated with work these days. A lot of people don't even see the difference. So for me, I started thinking, how can I take the lessons I'm learning outside of work with my personal growth and integrate that inside of work? And it just felt a lot more cohesive and things started to fall into place.
Absolutely. And that's the identity of an abundant leader. An abundant leader is someone who wants to leave people better than they found them in each conversation. And, you know, I love how you're speaking to it both from a manager's perspective and an individual contributor's perspective, because at both levels, as a manager, when you start to see, hey, my job is not just to help them hit their goals, help them be a good salesperson, help them make money. And we want to leave them better than we found them in those ways, for sure. But like, let's leave them a better person than we found them. Let's leave them more connected to who they are, who they want to be, what their vision is than we found them. And, you know, people spend so much time at work, especially in sales, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours sometimes. And as managers, as leaders, it's important to take responsibility for the impact that it's going to be had on them from spending that time in the environment, working for this company, working as a part of your team. And so are they a better person because they're a part of your team, or are they not a better person, right? Are they more stressed? Do they have more agenda? Are they more in their ego, right? Are they having more emotional challenges because of this versus it's actually bringing more life to their life to be a part of this team? And then from a salesperson's perspective, it's like that conversation with the prospect, yeah, we got to take them down our roadmap here. And we can have a conversation with them from a level of presence and sincerity in our care, which cannot be manufactured, which we'll talk about next. It's not like, you know, you can't like do the care thing, like, oh, turn the care on. But when people really feel that, you can make an impact on them. You can be the best part of their day through how you show up in that interaction.
Absolutely.
And the question I want to have for you is that, you know, this is something that I know that you've practiced, you've taken on as a part of your identity, right? As an abundant leader, and something that you've brought more into the way that you lead. And again, it's who you are. It's more a reflection of how you're showing up as a person, even the energy you're bringing, rather than what you're doing. And so I'm curious, how has the way that you viewed just taking care of yourself shifted and seeing like, no, that's actually a part of my job. That's a part of being the leader that I need to be. And in other words, like, what are the ways that you feel you are like nurturing a more abundant, caring energy to bring to your team or to prospects, or have done so over the past year?
So a couple of things. I think first and foremost, when anyone is starting to really work on their like personal growth, like taking the time to really understand your habits and noticing why you are showing up the way that you are, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I find journaling so impactful, is because it forces you to slow down and be like, whoa, I wasn't really present during my workday today, or I felt really anxious and rushed. And then thinking about, well, how did that come off to the people I was speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But like, you're never going to start seeing those patterns in yourself if you don't take the time to reflect on it. And so for me, this has been a journey of like 5-6 years of counseling and journaling and starting to recognize the patterns in myself and asking myself, why do I react the way that I do in those situations? Right? I felt that especially when I was starting at Outreach, joining remotely, all of my conversations were via Zoom. I'm such a relational person. And there was times when I would just show up and I just wouldn't speak my mind. And that's very unlike me. And so I tried to investigate and uncover what was coming up and stopping me. Because I think that really life is about unlearning a lot of the negative habits that we've acquired over time, right? From the time we were a small kid up until now. And so once I started uncovering some of those habits, I started clearly understanding, okay, well, the times that I see myself showing up this way, I'm also noticing that my weeks are packed. I have like 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. scheduled. I have all my social events scheduled. I haven't created any space to just relax, And so I started overarchingly seeing these patterns in myself. And I was like, okay, so I can make a choice right now to continue to reactively calm myself down, show up better after I go through these waves, or I can start proactively building things into my life that create a better outcome. And that was like a very conscious choice I had to make, and I still make. Like, don't get me wrong, I fall into those loops all the time. But some of it is as simple as really having a defined morning routine. For me, getting up, first thing I do is I make my bed, I drink a glass of lemon water, I'll do some jumping jacks, and I'll meditate and journal, and like sometimes it's so hard to do that, but I feel so much better during the day when I do that, So I think really, leading yourself, building in the habits, especially now during COVID when life is chaotic, that fill you up, right? So take time to think about what that is. Like for me, it's yoga, it's meditation, it's cooking, it's good conversation. And so I overarchingly know I want to accomplish those things every couple of days. How can I build that in and then create space with the rest of my schedule?
That's beautiful. It's like, it's bringing focus to those areas, knowing, and again, the question was like, how do you see that as a part of your job, right? And then in that, it's knowing the impact it's going to have on you, and that you're going to, abundance is to overflow, right? That's the root of the word. So now you can overflow to your team, as opposed to approaching your work week from all the things you need to do, want to get done, need to accomplish, and that might feel like it's taking from you then, or like, I only have so much in the bank energetically. It's getting a little bit more depleted each day, but all these different things I'm accomplishing or taking care of. And then you find yourself Wednesday, Thursday feeling like half of yourself. But when you're, when you're present to what's going to support you throughout the week, then you can be full and overflowing throughout the entire week.
That's exactly it. And I think the really powerful part of that is when you start recognizing those things in yourself. So like you just said, for me, when I'm overwhelmed or stressed and not doing the things that really calm me down, I tend to find myself with a list of 20 things to accomplish during the week. And I feel like I have to accomplish it all. It forces me to rush into things in conversations, rush out of things. And my day is just stacked. And the reality is I don't need to do 10 of those things on that list. I've just added it because I feel the need to do that. And when I'm in a better headspace, I have so much more clarity on, okay, let me actually look at this list and pick the 3 things that are going to be most impactful for my team. So I can crush those and focus on those and also have more space to just be present. So that's helping me to show up better as a leader. I would say the secondary impact of that is you start recognizing that in other people. Most people have this
right.
habit. And so if I'm speaking to someone on my team, or maybe even a leader above me, and I recognize that they're saying, okay, but like, guys, we got to do this, 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 this. When I feel that, like, oh man, that's a lot, it's probably because they feel that as well. And it creates a space for me to just be like, I'm going to engage differently in this conversation, even with this leader, and check in with them, right? Like, why are they overwhelmed? How can we calm down and focus on what matters versus the million things that we think we need to do?
And, I remember a conversation we had where we talked about you recognizing, hey, there's some leaders that aren't showing up right now, or they're showing up in a way that is not very productive. It's creating tension and conflict in the team. And there was this like frustration that you were experiencing with like, so you're like, can't we just work together? Can't we just collaborate? But not everybody is committed to self-awareness. And I remember what you and I talked about was how in those moments you could bring what you were wanting them to bring. Like, how do you wish they were showing up? Right? It's like, oh, a manager has stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and how they're passing down the outcomes to you or the rest of the team. And you want them to have a little more focus or calm. Great. How can you show up that way and actually bring that into the conversation, bring that into the relationship and the interaction versus being frustrated that they're not bringing it?
That was like honestly life-changing advice for me. And I carry it to this day. And I've shared it with a lot of people, a lot of mentees in my life, because sometimes I think we feel like we have to do something so big. And I also felt that way when I first started at Outreach. Like, I'm just like, I'm taking this new job. This is the person I want to be. How can I be that? And it's a lot of pressure to do that, and often undue pressure that, we're just putting on ourselves. And you made the great point that, hey, if you can change one interaction within your team meeting and create a positive impact, that's a huge win for the day. And sometimes that's all we have energy for.
Yep.
And that's okay. It's okay to have weeks where you're not conquering the world and changing your company culture, because really it's just hundreds of small interactions that create a culture in the end. So if that's all you have the energy to do for, like, if you're frustrated that your manager is just telling you 100 different things to do, how can you show up and bring a little bit more presence and comfort? Can you ask the team how their weekend was? If you feel like you wish you got a little bit more acknowledgement for the hard work you were doing, how can you show up and acknowledge your team members or your leader? And that is just as powerful as if you were to show up and like create this brand new presentation or idea, right? The long-term impact of it is very significant.
Awesome. So I want to kind of take us in our final direction here by going back to part of where we started, which is you sharing the vision of a year ago, having the vision of showing up and not having anxiety, being able to just be yourself, show up in a more relaxed way. And that was your vision a year ago. And you're still working towards that in certain ways, and you're doing it much more than you were a year ago. But my question is, how has your vision shifted now?
It's a great question. And like you said in the beginning of our conversation, it's a journey, right? It's never going to be clearly defined, but it's just progressing towards that vision each and every time. And I actually remember in January when we had an abundant immersion.
Dominica,
we did a similar exercise. And a lot of things opened up for me. And I think one of the biggest things, and I'm actually like looking at my journal from that trip, and what I had wrote down, I saw this morning and it just made me smile, was I'm realizing there's so much more than I've been able to imagine is possible, but I need to let the process happen. When individuals fill themselves up first, it's contagious. It creates meaningful connections and makes their life worth living. I have a strong feeling I'm going to be entering a very different path within the next few years. And what I can do in this moment is trust the unknown. And for anybody who knows me out there, I am like a goal oriented. This is my vision. I get it done. So the hardest thing for me in life is to trust the unknown. And I remember I literally saw an image and I was like, I don't know what this means. This seems like this could be a little bit weird. It was literally me jumping off of a cliff. And I was like, what does this mean? And when I really started thinking about it, it's taking that leap of faith and just trusting that, like, I know who I want to be. I know the impact I want to have on people. I don't need to know the exact path or journey that's going to get me there. Mm-hmm. So that's been a huge shift. And I think that's been very apparent with how I've lived my life over the past year, just saying yes to more things, trusting my gut, being okay with like not knowing what tomorrow or the next month is going to look like. And slowly it's morphed it from a thing of being a little bit nervous about the unknown to actually being very excited about the unknown. Mm-hmm. And like, that's a really good feeling because it allows you to not worry about what the outcome's going to be, but be present and make decisions in real time. And I know that's a skill set that's going to help me get to where I need to be.
That's so valuable. And it's important to be oriented towards your vision or your outcomes, but then in the moment, surrender to the unknown. And the reality is every moment is unknown. Every moment is uncertain. We don't know how people are going to show up on our calendar today. We don't know where they're going to be at. But if we're trying to control our day to reach our outcomes, then we're going to be frustrated by certain things that come up. Absolutely. It's going to shift our energy and then we're not going to show up as abundantly. But to your point, if you surrender to the unknown, it's like, I don't know how they're going to show up. I don't know what's going to happen in this conversation, but I know who I'm committed to being. I'm going to surrender to that. You don't know where that's going to lead you. You don't know exactly what outcome that's going to create, but allows you to be really present to what the highest possibility is in each moment as well. And that takes a lot of trust to focus on how you're showing up versus focusing on what you want to get from the experience, or what would be the box that if checked would lead to my outcome. That's scary even in the moment.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's something I work on every single day. And as I've been able to do that and focus less on what I want my end goal to be in my career specifically, like before I was so oriented in like, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years? Do I want to be a VP by then, a director? What about 15 years? And that felt so misaligned for me. And so it's interesting because I'm now at a point in my life where like, I don't have a 5-year plan anymore. And that used to be so scary for me because like, then what am I going to work towards? But instead, like what's really shifted over the past year is having that space to just be present has really helped me uncover what I'm truly passionate about and what I think could be a much bigger version of life for me over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And all of that comes from the self-work that I've done. So I am very, very passionate about like the science behind meditation, about how we hallucinate or create our own realities based on the experiences that we've had in our lives, and how that causes us to perceive the world in front of us. And so it's actually made it quite exciting to like be on fire and present in my career, but also knowing there's something much bigger that I feel like is my calling, but being okay not knowing how I'm going to communicate or show that to the world, but still working towards that, like continuing to do the things that excite me, doing research, writing my book, talking to people about these things. And I just know like what is meant to be will eventually happen, but I'm still kind of figuring out what that overarching vision is in the years to come.
I think we're just going to wrap there, Jenna. Any final words? Because that's just a powerful vision to end with. So anything else you want to share here before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate your time. I guess the one thing that comes to me is just, we have a very big decision to make right now during this time. Like things may get much worse, right? And the only thing that we can control is our internal world, our internal narrative, right? And so the more that we can really focus on how we see the world, how we see situations, asking why something frustrated us, why something made us feel that way, the more we're going to start understanding ourselves and just living a more abundant life. And, if there's ever a time to practice this, it's right now. And we're all in it together,
Matters more than ever. Well, amen. Absolutely. And just thanks for everything you shared today. This is a great conversation, and I'm sure those who are watching it, whether it's live or they're checking out the recording, are going to get a lot from it. So thank you so much, Jenna.
Thanks so much, Ben.